on that first part? What does red mean? You know what's red mean? Stop. That's what I just meant. I want you to hit one at a time. Because I want you to help me. Okay? Red means stop. What happens if you don't stop when you're supposed to stop? You get in trouble. You might have a wreck or something. Well, in the life, in our Christian life, if we don't stop and listen to what people tell us, and especially to what Jesus tells us to do, then we can get in trouble. Which one goes on there next? Okay. What color is that? What does orange mean? Yeah. Well, I'm going to say it means yield. Because we see orange tags on the back of tractors and farm equipment, that type of stuff. What do yield mean, Carter? You don't know? Well, that means we're supposed to watch out for others and kind of be very cautious of what's going on, because if you don't yield to something that's coming at you or that's in front of you, then you can run into it and stuff. Okay? And that's what we need to do in our Christian life. We need to yield to God's Word, what He tells us, so we'll know what to do when things come along in our life. What color is that? Yellow? That's right. What does yellow mean? You know what yellow means. You know. Slow down. That's right. How does it mean? Yeah, that means go. We'll go in just a minute. It does mean go. Yellow means slow down. And that means that you were supposed to slow down and let things happen in our life and try to be thankful for the good things that happen and pray about the bad things that happen, because Jesus knows best, doesn't He? Okay. What goes next? What color is that? Blue. And it means what? Go. That's right. And what are we supposed to do when we go? If we're playing a game or we're sitting somewhere stopped and the light turns green, we're supposed to take off on it. Yeah, we're supposed to use this. I'll tell you in just a minute. Okay, let's finish with this one, okay? So with the green, we should go out and do what Jesus tells us to do and use our life as a green light to help others and to preach the gospel. No, you don't have what you have. Okay. What color is that? Blue. What does blue mean? You have to go to? Okay. Blue means be very careful, because in our world here, if you see blue lights, it means you go. Be careful. Okay. But that's a good thing, because we need blue lights. If we didn't have blue lights, then a lot more stuff would go on than this. We're not supposed to be afraid of blue lights, okay? And a blue light means be very careful and cautious and slow down and do what you're supposed to do and fear not. That's what I think the blue light means in Jesus' terms. Fear not, because we're supposed to be happy and the way this journey is. Do you start out way down here when you're first born? Are you big when you're first born? You are. Well, I think you're more like this. You start out little and you grow in your faith and in your love for Jesus and in your life, okay? Y'all, what you think about that, okay? Can we pray just a minute?
We'll be in Judges chapter 4 today. I warned you a little bit last week that these stories from the time period after Joshua's death, when they're being established in the land, prior to the establishment of a king in Israel around 1000 BC, these are 200-300 years prior to that time. It's a strange time. And I warned you that some of these stories are a little strange. If you didn't believe me before last week's sermon, you definitely did by the time it was over, right? This one's a little odd too, but I think it's important to us as we look at it. There's a lot to teach us. With Judges in particular, something that is very important is that this book has a definite literary pattern. Now some people go, great, I'm going to take a nap now, since you said something like that. Hang on for a minute, because it's important and it helps us. Do you ever know anybody who does something and they know it's a mistake? They don't like the consequences of that mistake, but they keep doing it. You know anybody like that? That just keeps doing the same thing over and over and over again. Even if they got in trouble for it, or even if they had a problem. You met somebody like that? And we all can tend to be that way, to not learn from our experiences. And Judges works in a definite pattern. Now, during this time period, they lived as a loose confederation of tribes. 3 of them on the other side of the Jordan, the rest of them on this side. And they would kind of work together time by time. But there's a phrase that starts appearing in Judges, and it's a problematic phrase. Everybody did what was right in their own eyes. And that phrase always shows up in this book when things are complete and utter chaos. And there's a problem with that. And there's a definite pattern that this book runs through. Here's how the pattern works. I think I talked about it last time. When I do draw this at Tusculum on the board, when I taught this in the Old Testament, I use smiley faces, but I won't do that to you. Everything is good for a while. Everybody's listening to God. They're experiencing the blessings that God promised they would. And it's a good time to be alive, and it goes well. Now, in the midst of this good time, they start to compromise their identity. They begin to take on some pagan ways of worship, to be unfaithful to God, and to be wicked in the ways that they're living. God gets upset about it, tells them to quit. They don't quit. And then the next stop, God says, okay, eat it. Get your belly full of it. And He lets them get conquered by some oppressor. They go in misery for a while. They cry out to God for help. God sends a deliverer or a judge, as we might also translate that. And then the cycle starts over again. Here's where it picks up in Judges 4 with that cycle again. And in this case, the judge is an unusual type of person, you would think, for the ancient world. Let's meet him. The Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord again after Ehud had died. So the Lord sold them into the hand of King Jabin of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was named Sisera, and he lived in Harosheth Hagoyim, I think. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. He had 900 chariots of iron, and he oppressed them cruelly for 20 years. So what's going on in their culture at that time is simply this. Another nation that had the most advanced military technology on the planet, a chariot, particularly an iron chariot. This is during the Bronze Age where iron is just beginning to be used. Absolutely was wiping the floor with them and dominating them. In our world, we don't think about things like this, but in the ancient times, if somebody was cruelly oppressing you using military instruments, how are they doing it? If you get out of line, what are they doing to you? It was kind of a savage world. And they lived under this for 20 years. And finally, they cry out to God for help. Now, at that time, Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel. Is that a bit of a surprise? It is, isn't it? That there is a female at this early period in Israel's history who is providing some national level spiritual leadership. And here she is. She's sitting under a palm, the palm of Deborah, between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of the Ephraimites. And the Israelites came to her for judgment. Now, we don't want to reduce her into Judge Judy and to saying, I know that you took his goat, so you pay him 3 chickens in recompense. It's not exactly that kind of thing. This kind of judgment is more about spiritual guidance, some direction on how you ought to live and settle important matters. She was functioning as God's spokesperson at this particular time in Israel's history. And it's interesting, it says she was sitting outside of Bethel. Bethel is the official place for people to go meet with the priests. As we move through Judges, as we move into the opening chapters of 1 Samuel, the people who should have been speaking up for God, who should have been providing some leadership and direction, who should have been a witness among their own people, simply weren't. And God raises up this woman to do the job. She sent for and summoned Barak, son of Abinoam from Kadesh and Naphtali, and she said to him, the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go take position at Mount Tabor, bring 10,000 troops from the tribe of Naphtali and the tribe of Zebulun. The Lord says, I will draw out Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, and meet you by the river Kishon, with his chariots and his troops, and I will give him into your hand. That's a pretty strong promise from God, right? I'll draw out the enemy, you show up, and I'll give him to your hand. And Barak responds to Deborah, if you will go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. And she said, I will go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you're going will not lead to your personal glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. The NIV translate this, because of the way you are going about it, this will happen. That the glory will go to the hand of a woman. And Deborah got up and went with Barak to Kadesh, and they summoned the warriors, and Deborah went with him. Now, here's something that's interesting in this. Whose fault is it that they ended up in trouble? That they ended up oppressed? Their own. Sometimes when people that we encounter in life, and let's be honest, most of the trouble we've gotten into, we've put ourselves into it. But sometimes when we see that in other people, I remember working with a church food pantry in the past. And another person on staff made the comment, well, if they hadn't made such stupid decisions, they wouldn't be so poor that they'd have to come to the church for food. It's their own fault. Let them get their life together. Let them get in church. Let them get right, then we'll help them. I remember saying, now, let me just ask you this question. Most of the trouble that you've gotten into in your life, if you've gotten into any ever, maybe you've been better than me, who put you there? He said, well, me. What if God treated you in the way that you say treat these folks? And he said, well, I've got something to do. That's the way that goes sometimes when we have those talks, right? Their oppression is their own fault, and yet God answers, and He's going to help them in the midst of their trouble. And they call up this fellow to lead. And notice what his response is. When the summons come to him, you're the one that God has chosen. You're the one that's going to lead the people to something. Here's how he responds. He says, I will not do it unless. He puts a condition on his obedience for God. Now, it is not uncommon when you look through the Old Testament or when we look at our own lives. If when we feel like God has laid something on our hearts to do, for there to be some initial doubt and resistance. When Moses was originally called, how did he respond? A whole series of excuses to the burning bush. I can't go to Egypt, I don't talk plain. God said, I'll send you Aaron to go with you. He said, well, nobody will listen to me. He said a number of other things. And God finally just said, just go. And he went. Gideon does the same thing, right, Donnie? You're probably a little bit familiar with that story since you're in that organization, right? He does the same thing. He wants some tests. Isaiah, when God shows himself to Isaiah in the temple and says, go prophecy, he said, I have a dirty mouth. I'm a people of unclean lips. God says, I can take care of that. It's not uncommon for us when we feel strongly that there's something we ought to do, something that is important, to have a whole list of reasons why we can't. And God can handle that. And that's a very different thing than knowing we can and saying, I can, but I won't, unless you do this for me first. And that's essentially what Barak does. Now, there's a couple of things with this. First of all, it's not particularly brave for him to insist that a woman who was probably in her senior years at this point, since she'd already been judging Israel for 20 years, enter into battle with him before he goes. He understands her in a way as sort of a good luck charm, that if she goes with me, God will support us. But I want to make sure that because of what she represents, that I'm going to be a success. What you'll see about Barak as we continue this story is he very much wanted to make the big play. You ever been on a team with somebody like that? They won't pass the ball because they won't score the point. He's that kind of guy. He wanted that kind of glory. He wanted it for himself. But he doesn't want to take the risk on it unless he feels like it's a sure bet for him that the scales are tipped in his favor. God can deal with our protests at His call. If it's because of self-doubt, if it's because of something we feel inadequate or unworthy. But what will really put us in a bad condition is if when God lays something on our heart like that, that's important for us, that we feel like He wants us to do, and we respond with something of this way. I'll serve you if you heal me. I'll serve you if you give me that job. If only you would give me X amount of money a year, I'll start giving. I'll start doing. I'll serve you. If only you would change X, Y, Z thing in my life, God, then I'll serve you. Then I will. And there's a lot of people that approach their lives that way. And they're waiting and they're holding out as if they're holding God hostage to some offer of their obedience. As if God needs them anyway. And we've all been tempted to do that from time to time. But I think this is something that's true. If we are unwilling to serve God until He meets our conditions first, even if He met our conditions, we wouldn't serve Him then. Because what we wanted wasn't what He wanted. It was what we wanted. Does that make sense? There are a lot of people out there who've been holding out saying, I'll do it then, I'll get it right then, I'll serve you then. And when then comes and they get what they asked for, there's never a change that's made. It's all about the direction of your heart. Whether we're looking for what God wants to do, how He wants to use us, or how we want to use Him. And there are a world of differences between those two things. As the story continues, it has a brief interlude that introduces a man named Heber, the Kenite, who was descended from Moses' father-in-law. He kind of warns them that Barak has drawn up his soldiers. And then Sisera was told by Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. And he called all his chariots, all 900 chariots of iron, and all his soldiers that were with him. And they went up to the river Kishon. And Deborah said to Barak, get up, for this is the day on which the Lord has given Sisera into your hand. The Lord is going down before you to fight. So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with his warriors following him, and the Lord threw their army into a panic, and all the chariots and their army before Barak. And Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot, while Barak pursued their chariots and the army to Harosheth Hagoyim. All of the army of Sisera fell by the sword, and not one of them was left. Here's what happened. There's a problem with the chariot. It only works on one kind of ground. Can you guess what kind of ground that is? Hard ground. It also happens to be level. You ever walked on a riverbank or by a creek bank? Nobody ever has? What happens sometimes if you do? Why? It's squishy. Imagine driving a chariot through a riverbank. It didn't work out so well. And they're completely slaughtered. And look at what Barak does. It's not enough to get the army. He's after the captain. Because in the ancient world, you wanted the trophy of having gotten the enemy captain. It was important. And God told him, it's not going to be yours. And look at how hard he goes after it. He pursues this guy for miles, looking everywhere for him. You know, everybody wants blessing. Everybody wants victory. Everybody wants to accomplish something. They want to feel joy. They want to feel peace. Whatever it is. But that doesn't come to us in the way that we want when we try to dictate the terms of our service to God. When we stand before Him, we always come to Him as somebody who knows better than we do. And sometimes we question that. It's part of being human. Jesus Himself did it. Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. But nevertheless, not what I want, but what you want. Sometimes our prayer is, God, not what you want, but what I want. And that's one of those things that we have to work out. Sometimes what we have to do when the moment comes is just simply do it. And trust that God will make it okay. That we have a role in that to play. And if He's laid it on our hearts to do it, there's a reason that we should. Some people don't know when to quit on something. And they will continue to try to strive for something that they have been told will not be theirs. I remember playing football. I don't know why this happened. It was a scrimmage. It wasn't a real game. This never happened in a real game. But whoever this was, we were beating the pants off of them. So That's how I knew it wasn't a real game. West Green didn't used to do that. And they were switching out to some of their younger players, and they lined up this little guy across from me that looked like he was Carter's size. He said, "Oh, I'm going to mess you up. I'm going to get that quarterback." That's kind of what he sounded like. And I thought, where can I hit him? There's nothing there. I thought, what do I do? And he ran at me, and it was a pass block. Has anybody ever played football? Well, even your parents don't watch you play if you did. But what you do in a pass block, you just kind of set your feet and you push. And I sent this kid flying. It was like something out of a Jackie Chan movie. And he just goes flying, maybe even one of those crazier karate movies, just goes flying backwards. And there he come again. And the same thing happened again. And there he came again. I said, "Just stay down this time." And he said, "Okay." He wanted something very important, but he knew when to quit because it was outside of his grasp. And I don't mean like I'm big and bad. That doesn't happen very often. It was just something funny that I remember. Barak kept reaching for something. There are some people in their life who will do something and it knocks them out of an opportunity. They, in a critical moment, will say, "No, God, I'm not going to do this now until this and this and this lines up." And they miss an opportunity, they break a relationship, something has occurred, and they spend the rest of their lives trying to grasp for it. There are some things in your life that you can only be given, that you can't take when you want. And if people spend all of their life and all of their energy trying to take something that's not for them, they get frustrated, they get bitter, and they end up disappointed, and they miss the work that God would have wanted to do with them. Just because we make a misstep along the way. That doesn't mean we're done. But that may mean that we're going to be used in a different way. Barak couldn't accept that. So he pushes and he pushes, hunting this guy down because he really wants the credit. He wants the glory. He wants to finish it. Sisera, for his part, had fled away on foot, and he goes to a place that's socially improper. If Heber is his ally, he should have gone to him, and instead he goes to the tent of his wife, Jael, for there was peace between Jabin of Hazor and Heber the Kenite. Jael comes out to meet him and says, "Lord, turn aside to me and have no fear." And she turned him into her tent, and she covered him up with a rug. And he said to her, "Give me some water, for I am thirsty." Instead, she opened a skin of milk and gave him a drink and covered him. He said to her, "Stand at the door, and if anybody comes and asks you, 'Is anyone here?' just say no." But Jael, the wife of Heber, took a tent peg, and she took a hammer in her hand, and she waited until he was good to sleep, and she went to him softly and whacked the ground. And there he died. And as Barak came in pursuit of Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and said, "Come, I will show you the man you're seeking." He went into her tent and found Sisera, the captain, laying dead with a tent peg through his temple. And on that day God subdued King Jabin of Canaan before the Israelites. Then the hand of the Israelites bore harder and harder against Jabin, king of Canaan, till they destroyed him. And the land had peace after that for 40 years. It's kind of a horrible story in a way. And we would look at a character like that and say, that's an awful thing that she did. She tricked him. It was a horrible, horrible thing. Not many of the lessons in this book, if there are any, are clear. They're not anybody who's a shining example of a human hero. But here's the thing. Barak had been offered a significant task. Lead your people to freedom. God wants to use you in a remarkable way. And he said, I won't do it unless God gives in to my conditions first. And God still used this man. But it wasn't him who did the most important thing. We look at what this woman did and we say, that's a really troubling, violent story. It's one of those things in the Old Testament that we feel uncomfortable about. But at the same time, there's a sense of justice here. This is a man who had used his military might, his weapons, to cruelly oppress and abuse people for 20 years, and he's running for his life. He comes into the house of somebody who should be powerless, just a normal, ordinary woman, and he makes all these demands. And with something that would be in any household that anybody that lived in a tent would have used any given day. A man who had cut down hundreds of people with a sword is brought down with a tent peg. And God uses a very crude tool and a very crude method to get what it is accomplished He wanted to do. Now, I'm not saying that any of you should go out and do likewise. But when the moment comes to you, whatever it is that God has called you to do, instead of qualifying our obedience and saying, now God, I will do this if and only if you do this first. See, that's really a way of disobeying. We don't always know the part that God wants to use us in. But when you look at the story of Barak, when you look at this story and then the poetic retelling that follows in chapter 5, we get the sense that he's minimized, that he is less than what he could have been. Because when the moment came, he wanted it his way instead of God's. I think that's the scary thing. Because I know myself that I often want what I want when I want it. And sometimes God is an awfully convenient way for me to get that. Or I sometimes feel like I've been so good and so obedient, maybe He ought to do something for me. When the fact of the matter is, God doesn't need any of us. But He longs to include and use us in this process of making all things right. The best thing that we can do is simply to trust that. One of the worst things in the world is to feel like there's something we ought to do, that we feel strongly like we ought to do. I remember particularly in high school, there was a kid, he was slow, he wasn't right. And there were some kids picking on him. And I remember sitting with a friend of mine saying, somebody ought to do something about that. And I remember feeling bothered. And I remember hesitating, saying, what if they make fun of me for saying something about it? And I saw another guy in our class that wasn't anybody would have messed with get up and stand up in that kid's face who was picking on this little boy and said, you leave him alone or I'm going to drag you out behind the dumpster. And I watched somebody else walk away with a blessing that I wished I'd shared with them. Because in the moment, they did the right thing. It can be in any area of life. Do you remember the story of the servants with the talents that Jesus gave them? And one of them used his talents well and he made 5 more. The other one used his 2 well and made 2 more. And one of them used this incredible gift, this investment that his master had made in him and did nothing with it, buried it in the ground. Do you remember what happened to that talent? The master said, take it from him and give it to the one who has 10. You know why he said that? When God wants us to be a part of a significant thing and we say no, when we put the brakes on it, if it's important to God, He won't wait on us. He'll give it to somebody who's already faithfully serving Him. And all we have is a sense of loss. That's not how God wants it to be for anybody. So when it comes to us, don't wait. Don't wait on God giving into your demands. Serve Him in where you are now. See what He does with that. You never know. But if you trust Him in that way, the thing that you will never know is this. The awful, terrible thing it is to say, oh, what might have been.